Have you ever had someone constantly get your name wrong? Hi, I'm Ben. Benny! Nope, just Ben. Benji? Please just call me Ben. B Money. Well, jazz icon and worldwide music legend Louis Armstrong faced a similar problem. So, to set the record straight once and for all, here's more from my conversation with Alphonso Horne, who has worked extensively with the Louis Armstrong House Museum in New York and with the Jazz at Lincoln Center's programs that celebrate Louis Armstrong's music. I get people correcting me all the time whenever I say Louis Armstrong. And the thing I always use is actually his recording of Hello, Dolly, where he says,
"This is Louis."
Hello, Louis.
Dolly.
And he holds that S, and I'm like, he is saying his name with the S. How did you discover that you say Louis instead of Louis Armstrong?
Yeah, so I mean, Louis was like the nickname that he was given, but he never really liked that nickname. You know, there's a lot of nicknames for him, including Pops and Satchmo and Dippermouth. He preferred to be called Louis. That's all. We all have a million projects, but there's two main ones that I've put up periodically, which is the Gotham Kings, which was curated through Jazz at Lincoln Center, which is supposed to be the music of New Orleans and centering around Louis Armstrong and his mentor, King Oliver. They had a group together called King Oliver Creole Jazz Band. Around that period was obviously the birth of jazz and all of that stuff. And that being in New Orleans, and so like that band is just very Louis Armstrong, New Orleans, King Oliver, you know, that sound of the early 20s into the 30s. And then also like we go into like the influence of that sound into like brass bands, brass funk, all of that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. It's really fun. I don't like to consider myself a spokesman for Louis Armstrong. But, you know, I'm doing a lot of material for the Louis Armstrong Museum House, including like children's shows called Pops His Tops at his house, actually. His house is amazing. It's in Queens, and right across the street they're building like a new museum for him, like multi-million-dollar museum for him, right across the street. And one of the cool stories about Louis Armstrong is that he recorded literally everything, all of his gigs, all of his rehearsals, him practicing at home, him getting in fights with his family, like everything.
Wow.
He recorded everything, in his words, for posterity. So he has the largest archive out of anyone in all of jazz. We have all of that at the library. And so what we're doing right now in the next like week or so is building a children's show out of that material, taking all of those clips like, you know, that we connect with and building children activities and making a whole video out of it. So, so I'm doing that for the show called Pops Tops.
And I have this cool Time magazine cover of Louis with the crown. I look at that and just feel so inspired every day because he's just so iconic and he's so original and so genuine, and that's incredible. What a valuable resource for kids to have Louis Armstrong as an example, to emulate him, but the example that he sets, that's really cool.
You know, as we're teaching about his life, we're really learning about jazz itself. That he was born in New Orleans. Jazz was born in New Orleans.
Can I hear you say New Orleans?
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Now, the reason why it was born in New Orleans is because at that time in America, New Orleans was one of the largest ports in the entire world. You had people from Spain, from France, from England, celebrating their cultures and their traditions all in New Orleans. Can I hear you say New Orleans?
New Orleans.
And most importantly, there were African people that came to the New World, but they didn't come to the New World as free people. They came as slaves, and they weren't allowed to practice their traditions and customs, except on one day, and that day was on the Sabbath, in a place called Congo Square. Can I hear you say Congo Square?
Congo Square.
All of this was happening in New Orleans, and one very, very important man named Louis Armstrong. Can I hear you say Louis Armstrong?
Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong played the trumpet, and he was very, very important for bringing all of these different styles together.
Then you have the element of the blues that starts to come in. And some of that does come from the Appalachian, bluegrass type of sound, but then also from Africa, it's a guitar from West Africa. The guitar is called a guitar, and that was the birth of the banjo. And so those influences started to blend in and that's where blues influences start to come in, and then swing eventually with early brass bands and Louis Armstrong. So anyway, it all comes together.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a really awesome clip that I'll try to share with you where he says he loves listening to all types of music, and the hot thing at that time during that recording was like the Beatles. Yeah, I have recordings of the Beatles. I love listening to them. They're pretty good,
That's awesome.
One of the directors there, Ricky Riccardi, is the person, the full-on Louis Armstrong aficionado. He knows every record, every recording, just in his head, and so he's the best resource for Louis Armstrong. And he, for years he had been trying to get me to come there to play his trumpets. Yeah. And I'm like, it's like the holy grail for me. I don't want to touch his trumpets, And then I remember I was doing a gig in Queens, and I left my mouthpiece in my other trumpet case, and I was and we were right. We were a couple of blocks away from the Louis Armstrong house, and I was like, "Oh, please, can I borrow one of Louis's mouthpieces?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he was like, "Now you gotta definitely come to the exhibit and play." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." And I'm like, I'm sweating.
That is so cool.
To really always come back to the folk element of jazz. That's what made jazz very popular. Is that folk element of people getting up and dancing and singing along. And dancing along and really engaging with the musicians in that way. That even in the context of Louis Armstrong, that this was a dance band culture. In the North, you had the sweet music, where it was just like ba 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 dee da dee da, very very sweet and dancing waltzes and foxtrots and all of that.
Right.
And then you had someone like Louis Armstrong that brought the New Orleans hot. So there was sweet and hot. And once they heard that, they were like, whoa, and the dancers started to react to that. So instead of foxtrot, it became Lindy hop and hoofing, And the dance started to change too, and the way that people sing. A song I don't know, let's see. I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by the riverside. That everything was done in that kind of style, very sweet. And then when Louis Armstrong, I'm gonna lay down, that's when that kind of soulful, raspy, folks element started to get blended into popular music. The popular music was sweet. And Louis Armstrong came in and made it hot. And that's what I think he's our first, or at least one of our first pop musicians, He transcended the trumpet, changed the way that people played music, changed the way that people sang music, from sweet to hot, and also transcended his instrument, transcended his voice into acting, into being, our first celebrity that any pop star from today, you can really trace back the influences back to Louis Armstrong. Beyonce, influenced by Aretha, influenced by Mahalia Jackson, influenced by Bessie Smith, and directly played with Louis Armstrong. Really understanding that every style of music, even classical music, European classical music, it started out as folk music, and just really, just really understanding, really coming from that place, treating music as a folk music, as a vehicle for connecting, is very important, especially during these times.
When I reflect on 2020, I'm especially grateful for artists like Alphonso, who so generously shared their talents and their creativity with the world when we've needed it most of all. If you're grateful for the multitude of ways Alphonso or other artists made 2020 a little more bearable, please support them in any way you can. You can find ways to directly support Alphonso in the description below. I want to leave you today with a special song from the Jazz at Lincoln Center's Jazz Academy concert, Let Freedom Swing. You can find a link to that entire concert and all the others featured in this episode in the description below. See you next time!
3.